All right, babes, we are back with another episode of The Pieces. And today's guest has been described as one of the most outspoken and controversial young feminists in the UK. She is the author of the #1 Sunday Times bestseller, What a Time to Be Alone and How to Get Over a Boy, and the host of the chart-topping podcast, The Slumflower Hour. She is no stranger to dividing the internet. It's Chidera Eggerue.
Thank you for that intro.
Hey.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
First of all, can I just say, I loved you on Drag Race. I was rooting for you.
Thank you, baby.
You was literally my winner. And I was really, really drawn to how, first of all, your flexibility. What the hell?
Thank you.
Second of all, you really brought your full personality from beginning through to end. I know that can't have been easy throughout because obviously television shows the best bits, but you really showed integrity and strength of character. And I'm really proud to see how your career has evolved since leaving Drag Race, because it's not always easy to make something for yourself and of yourself and maintain your ownership after coming off of a televised competition show. It can be quite easy to get sucked into that, but to see how you've done that and now you've got this amazing podcast, I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
As a fan and as someone that is also in this industry, well done.
Thank you. I feel like a bad bitch recognises a bad bitch.
Period.
Period. Well, thank you for coming on, because I feel like you are someone that... So, actually, let me just... Because I've written here, the outspoken and controversial. How does that... Because you've obviously... People have said that before.
I identify as controversial.
And we love this.
Thank you.
So how do you feel like when people say that? Are you just like, fuck it?
I think when people say it, I understand why they're saying it, and controversial is not inherently a bad word.
No.
Controversial, in my understanding, and from being a controversial person, it just points to a person who says things or lives in a way that, I guess, incites other people's questions or rage. My intention is never to be deliberately controversial for the sake of being flippant or destructive. It's just that the inherent nature of being a powerful woman who speaks up for herself and uses my knowledge and my insight to encourage other women to be more selfish when dating men, that is inherently controversial. So anything I do surrounding that will always carry a controversial undertone.
Well, I think it's amazing that you just stand up for what you believe, and you will stand up for other people to believe in that too. And I think the idea of being seen as controversial or controversial figure for standing up for something, because I think a lot of people won't. A lot of people don't say anything. So it's even harder to do that. And like, obviously, with the internet, there's obviously things that you've said where people have had divisive opinions. How do you deal with that? How does that affect you?
That's a good question. I think for me, by the time I've said something that might be perceived as divisive, I've already taken ownership of what I've said, and I already know why I've said it. I know that I can hold my own. If someone was to politely ask me, what did you mean by that? I can explain what I mean. I don't expect them to agree after I explain, but like I said, I never say things for the sake of just being controversial, and I don't shy away from it either. I'm very used to people being annoyed at me for stuff, and then what normally happens is years later, someone will be like, you know what, when you said that time, it was really controversial and people didn't really get it, and then something happened to me and then I experienced it and I realised, oh, you were right. And it's so weird how we're so angry at women who are just outspoken. And so I think for anybody who sees the world as the way it is and wants to create change or wants to speak up about what isn't fair, you have to be prepared that people will dislike you for being outspoken. So you're better off using your time to really strengthen your arguments, like really understand the root of what you're saying. Be sure that you deeply stand with it so that if no one else is standing with you, you are standing with yourself and you know exactly why you said it and what you meant and what it means to you.
So obviously I think I agree totally with everything you're saying. And I think like obviously when people catch up, if they get it, they get it. And if they don't, they don't. And they will get it eventually. But do you ever feel like you've stood for something or you've said something and then that's kind of changed over time? Like your opinion about something you've said has maybe changed?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because I feel like we grow.
Of course.
And we change a lot. And I even feel like, so I'll use an example that I spoke about on Drag Race, about my gender identity. And I feel like since then, it's changed a lot.
What was it that you said?
So I spoke about being gender non-binary. And actually now I feel like I understand the idea of what non-binary is to be a lot more different to what it was a few years ago. I feel like it become the opposite of what I intended to say, which was it became a label, you know? And I was kind of like, I kind of fuck labels, I'm just me. And then I feel like it became its own label, you know? So I feel like I'm still gender non-conforming.
Do you still identify as non-binary?
I don't know because I feel like I definitely am gender non-conforming if non-binary suits that. But I feel like for me, it was like not about putting a label on. And then it became
Do you have any pronouns at all?
Bad bitch.
Yeah.
Or they, them. I just say they, them, but I don't mind. I feel like my pronouns, I really don't mind. I think it comes down to an intent.
Yes.
If I'm like glam, full look, and then someone's like, "You right, geezer?" I'm like, "You're trying to be a dick."
Deflect.
Yeah, but it is what it is. But yeah,
that's a great example. I guess to answer your question of have I said anything that I've changed my mind on, I think I used to have an outlook towards men that was very much all is doom and gloom. Like men are never going to be good, and they are all out to get you. Now my view has changed to most of them are out to get you, not all of them. But sarcasm aside, my outlook has now evolved in a way where I can recognize that there are men who can suit and fit into your life as a woman in my lived experience. But in order to be able to resonate with and attract those men, you really need to uphold a version of yourself that will not accept anything outside of that. Previously, my mindset was, you know, just don't even bother with men. They're all going to be out to get you. But now it's about, if you are specific about what type of life you want, then you need to be extra selfish and picky about what kind of man you're going to bring into your life, because you can relate to this as a public figure. There will be people that want to be around you because they like the idea of you and what your success reflects on them through their association with you. And so it often means that you need to be a lot more picky and discerning of who you keep close to you.
Totally.
Especially even if you weren't a public figure, you're an attractive person, you're still going to have people that will want to be around you because of the idea of what your attractiveness means, and maybe they see you for the surface layer of who you are. And similarly, in my experience as a woman, straight men see women for the surface of who we are for the most part. And so through evolving my views, now it's about, okay, I can acknowledge that men are not very good people, but there are some of them that are somewhat okay. And the ones that are somewhat okay are the ones that I will pick from if at all I decide that I still want to lay with men within the next 2 years.
Yeah. And I guess that's it's a fluidity, isn't it? I feel like social kind of expectations and things change. And I feel like you are someone that has like very powerful, strong opinions, very inspiring.
Thank you. So are you.
Thank you. Where do you think that comes from for you?
I think.
So you grew up in Peckham?
Yes, right, South East London.
I used to live in Camberwell.
Oh my God, neighbour!
Yeah.
SC5, baby.
Listen,
I was born in King's College Hospital.
Were you? For somewhere that is Zone 2, Camberwell's the most disconnected part of London.
Right? It's so random.
There's like no trains or anything.
Like kind of near Vauxhall, but then it's like still not got any transport links.
No,
other
it's
bus.
Like half an hour walk to Elephant Castle it was.
You get a donkey to work, babe.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in that kind of neighbourhood?
Do you know what's interesting, right? Like, because Peckham and largely like South East London, Camberwell included, is a largely densely black population, they often refer to Peckham as Little Lagos because I'm from Nigeria. And it was, for me, very affirming growing up around seeing lots of black people. But then as I started to get a bit older and start to navigate more of London, I start to realise, okay, where I'm from is definitely a micro world almost. And now that I'm much more of an adult and I'm navigating various cultures within Britain, specifically the UK, it's really been an adjustment learning how to be around like people who came from money. Like, you know, when they like make a reference, you're like, I don't know what that is. You just got to pretend you know what that is.
Especially when they're not dressing like they've got the money.
Yeah.
You know, and then you see their Instagram stories.
It's like, Pippa, do you want to go for drinks in it? I'm like, I don't know what that means, babe.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, full on working class background.
What do you think of Peckham now?
Oh my goodness, it's so crazy
It's
how Peckham's
changed so
gentrified
much,
now. There
yeah.
are rumours that they're going to be bringing a Soho House to Peckham.
Really?
What the hell?
No way.
We can't have anything.
No. It's crazy because I remember like my friends used to live like by Gospel Oak.
Honor Oak?
Honor, yeah, there, and we'd like go up, and then that was like 15 years ago, and then I was back in there recently, and I'm not gonna lie, I did go to Yoga Rise in Peckham, but it's changed so much.
Yeah.
There's like literal like markets. Is it not a box park, but there's like something similar to that.
Yeah, they're trying to proper make it this like social hub, future of South London. So cringe seeing that, you know, especially because I think it's that working class thing of you really want to hold on to the origins of where you were from, but evolution happens everywhere, isn't it? Evolution happens in us. It also happens in where we came from, and we won't always like every single part of the evolution, whether that's where we came from or even in ourselves.
I went to uni at Elephant and Castle, and that's...
What, South Bank?
Yeah, Elephant and Castle. No, sorry, University of the Arts.
Oh, UAL.
So I went to uni there, and that has changed so much since then.
Yeah.
But they've got rid of the whole market and the whole like culture of like what was there before.
What were you studying at UAL?
I studied journalism.
She's a journalist, honey.
Yeah.
Period. Interrogate me. Yeah, I went to UAL as well, but I went to London College of Fashion and failed my degree.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
Well, funny you said that because I was actually about to speak to you about that. So, you went to London College of Fashion. So I actually did a year at London College of Fashion because I was doing fashion journalism.
Oh, of course.
And then I went into the second year doing just like kind of a straight journalism. I was very angry on Facebook at the time. It was like 2016.
What was you angry about?
It was very like it was Jeremy Corbyn time.
Oh my goodness,
the right wing media. I hated them. I was like going to Jeremy Corbyn rallies. I had like a blue beard. Yeah, it was a whole thing. But I kind of actually got into drag, and that's what I was using as a way of like getting a bit political and like saying something on stage or whatever. So I kind of married that like creative side, you know. But you studied fashion design.
Yes.
You didn't finish your degree.
I didn't finish the degree. No, I failed it.
What advice would you give to young adults or teenagers who are in that situation, like who might feel like obliged to go to university to finish it? Like, how did that decision for you contribute to you today?
That's such a good question, because part of what made me feel okay with failing the degree was before influencers were a thing, there was fashion bloggers. Do you remember the fashion bloggers?
Yes.
So I was like some sort of budding fashion blogger, and I was slowly building up my little Twitter presence. And I really thought in my delusional mind that I'm going to be famous soon, so I don't even need this degree. So I stopped taking it seriously. Yeah. But it also happened to be bad timing because I kind of got really depressed in my final year. And you know how it is with university, like once you start the final year, you can't quit the course anymore. No. So I kind of just accepted that I was going to fail the degree, but I was like, well, it doesn't matter though, because I'm going to build this social media presence and I'm going to still have something for myself anyway. Turns out I was able to do that. But in terms of giving advice to young people, especially those who maybe are in a place in university right now where they're not sure if they even want to finish the course or if it's too late for them to quit, I would always say, make sure you've got something that you're building for yourself already. Like anything that you're doing, whether it's a course, whether it's something that's like a fun activity, whatever you're doing, it needs to be feeding into that thing that you love doing. Because I don't think that if you was to get a first, like you get the highest degree, it doesn't guarantee you a job. It doesn't guarantee you anything. You still need to be building something for yourself. So whether you go to university or not, there is still work that has to be done if you want to be in this creative industry. Because the creative industry now in 2024 is not what it was back in like 2016, 2015. Like it's changed so much now that there has to be something deep within you that you know is an unwavering truth that you know to be true that will be your North Star in any creative endeavor you follow, because it's so easy to get knocked to the side in this industry now, where even in the modeling industry where you don't need any qualifications, now you can have a large following on Instagram and have defined cheekbones, and you'll be passing up people who maybe don't have a following but have all the metrics, the measurements for what it takes to be a good model. So now it's like you've really got to, not to be cliche, but thinking outside of the box, like thinking beyond the box now. You've got to bring a lot more than just a degree.
there's always going to be someone else coming up behind, right? And you've got to stand, like, that's why I think what you do, and like you standing for something, it's so important. It's so important to do that because it sets you apart, you know? Like, people listen to your podcast all the time and it does so well because you've always got something to say, you know? And I think that's amazing.
Thank you
I
so
feel
much.
like it's so, I just like love listening to you just like talking, or like one of them recently, what was it? You were like reading like messages from a guy that was like taking you out in Mayfair. Like, and then you just
stupid nightclub. Oh,
do you feel like, so do you ever get guys, if they're messaging you, that are intimidated?
I feel like most men are intimidated, and how I know that they're intimidated is they do this thing that is called negging. So negging is when, for example, I could be like, I love your jumper, and then I might, to try and like chip you down a little bit, I'll be like, but don't you think the sleeves are a bit too long? Like, it's a nice jumper, but like the sleeves are a bit... It's like a way to try and... Which I don't believe. I think it's beautiful. We love the little stacked sleeve moment, period. But it's a way to sort of bring you down, but uplift you at the same time. And I noticed that when men are intimidated, that's an indicator. They will try to chip away a little bit at you. And so now that question links into why I do the work I do and why I'm so passionate about encouraging women to be more picky and selective about men, and pick men who have got so much going for them that they have no reason to be intimidated by you. Because
Absolutely.
because the only men who will be intimidated are men who haven't built something for themselves, who don't really have anything to impress you with. And so, yeah, most times when I'm talking to men, I can tell that this is not going to last very long, which is why I don't care about how well it goes. So I'm like, I'm just going to say my worst things to him, and oh well.
I feel like that's something that people, it's like about loving yourself, isn't it? Because a lot of what you do and what you speak about, and even the books that you've written, it's all about self-love, you know, and finding that. How has that developed for you over the years?
That's a really beautiful question. For me, how self-love has developed over the years is being more trusting of my intuition, even when I have no evidence to doubt the person, especially in the context of dating. There have been many times when things are going well on the surface with a guy, but for some reason I get this weird doubt, or I just get a funny feeling towards him. And so once I get that funny feeling, I know that at some point I'm going to find out something, or he's going to say something and be like, see, I just had a feeling, I just knew it. So before, when I'd get the funny feeling, I would just be like, well, probably just me being anxious. Like, he hasn't done anything, so I can't judge him based on he hasn't done anything. But nowadays, the more I trust myself and the more I love myself, all I need is a funny feeling, and I'm going to change how I'm acting towards him. And then lo and behold, something happens and I'm like, see, this is why I'm glad I listened to myself. And that's the thing about loving yourself. We talk a lot about intuition and following your gut. The thing about your gut, though, is it can only get stronger when you trust it, even without having physical evidence to trust it. If you wait to have physical evidence, you haven't listened to your gut, because the whole thing about the gut is that you get the notification before it happens. So most times when you get a gut feeling...
That's such a beautiful way to view it.
But it's so interesting, though, when you see it that way, because when you get a gut feeling, you haven't got any tangible evidence. If there's something already happening, that's not a gut feeling, you're just witnessing an event happening. But when you get that gut feeling, the more you trust it without having a reason on paper or in front of you to trust it, the stronger your gut gets. Because now that I'm getting older and I love myself, I don't feel any reason to choose the benefit of doubt for a man over my gut, because it's literally a man. Like, do you date men?
Yes, I have a partner.
Right. So from your experience of having dated men, you will know that like men are still men, regardless of whether they date men, whether they date women, they're men. So you can't afford to choose a man over your gut. That rarely works out.
And unfortunately, I feel like I have in the past. And I feel like, I guess, as an ex of mine from a few years ago, ended up being like the most narcissistic person I've kind of ever met. And he would like gaslight, and it was before I like kind of knew what gaslighting was. And then I would like always but then I started trusting the gut, and then got rid of it.
Was this before Drag Race?
No, it was after Drag Race as well,
my God. So that's interesting, because this is another thing, right? What people don't really understand, and I've not even been on a competition show before, but I understand deeply the surrounding aspects of it. When you come out of a competition show, like in your case, you didn't win, but you was our winner. Like the internet made sure everyone fucking knew that you was the nation's winner, right? People don't understand there's still a vulnerability, because now you're exposed to way more people than you've ever known to know you, which means that you are prime territory for any person who wants to target you for narcissistic abuse. And the main reason why is, on the surface, you think, oh, this person's successful, they've succeeded in this television program, they've got high confidence, which I'm sure you do have high confidence, that's why you did well. But at the same time, somebody who understands how to get into a person's head, they will look for a loophole in your confidence and they will hone in on that. And they won't start out being horrible. They're obviously going to start out being charming and flattering. And usually a lot of times it's people who have some sort of position of power that will do that. And they will use what they have to try and like really bamboozle you and excite you. If they're not someone in a position of power, oftentimes people like us who have come from a very humble background, we still know what it's like to be in that position. So no matter how big of a star either of us are, we're still going to feel sorry for someone and be like, oh, well, I see the star in you, even though the world doesn't see it yet. And it's like, there's a reason why no one sees the star in that person, because they're a fucking horrible person. You're going to find out in 6 months' time. But it's so hard for people to understand how easy it is to get into an abusive relationship with a narcissist. All they need is, first of all, someone that's going to be really flashy to make them look good. And secondly, all they need is for you to have some sort of insecurity that you cannot at that time solve by yourself. That's all they need. And you're not a stupid person for dealing with it. I've come across the most intelligent people, and still, because intelligence is empathy. And if you're an empathetic person, you're an intelligent person, and you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and you can understand why and how they've been in that situation. And of course, you'd want to help them. Of course, you want to see the nuance in their behavior. And that's how the person is able to start to drop their suitcases in your life and just really like crack knuckles and get down with this abuse. It's so insidious, but
they prey on that empathy, I think. Narcissists.
Deeply. And that's why for me, again, as someone who dates men, one of the more controversial, more recent things that I've started saying more often is just stop feeling sorry for men. If they got a problem, let them solve it. Just tell them, you got this, buddy. You can do it. That's the most I'm going to do. I'm not about to come and carry your problems for you. I'm not about to help you unpack why your dad left. Like, you're going to have to figure that one out. Like, because what happens is a lot of men, what they do is like, they bring their problems into people's lives and they genuinely expect that if you love them, you will deal with their problems. That's what they consider unconditional love. And it's like, no, you know what? Sometimes loving men needs conditions. And if you don't implement those conditions, they will run over you and move on to the next person.
How do you think we deconstruct the systemic... Because I almost would say we are all kind of victim to this patriarchal system, this whatever we call it, whatever it is, like the man being on top. But in a way, a lot of them have also part of that system. Do you know what I mean? How do we deconstruct that? Because I almost feel like when I look at... I'm queer. I came out quite young. When I look at like...
You're queer?
I'm queer.
What?
I'm very queer. But when I think about like my cousins who were like less femme, way less femme, they were...
So they were queer but not as femme as
They
you.
weren't queer, no, they were like, they're straight.
Okay,
they're straight, I think. Straight.
At that point.
Heteroflexible. They're straight. But they got treated differently in a way because I was feminine. They were told that I was kind of allowed to do what I wanted. I was dancing or whatever. But they were like, you can't cry, you've got to be strong, you've got to do this. And I think that from a young age is what's creating all of these men with mummy issues and these men that can't kind of, I don't know, like be nice to each other, you know, and nice to women. Like, how do we deconstruct all of this?
And what's so ironic about what you shared as well in the context of men not being able to emote is I've never seen more emotional people than men. Like the way that they kill women for refusing to give a phone number, like that's an emotion.
That's mad. Though,
right, like rejection sensitivity. And so the question of how do we deconstruct comes up a lot in these conversations. And I always deflect that question to the men because it's like, that's the guy's problem now. Just like, it's like when the topic of racism comes up and a white person's asking a black person, like, how do we deconstruct racism? It's like, I don't know, you guys made racism. I don't know, I'm just hearing it. Like, so it's like, for me as a woman, part of what has become my radical stance is recognizing that the system that men continue to reinforce daily is not mine to deconstruct. They have to deconstruct it by themselves. They're not going to deconstruct it because women have done everything. We've done the whole, oh, he can't emote, so I'm going to mummy him. Okay, now he's murdered me. Great. Oh, men find it hard to speak up, so I'm going to just like let him speak up and dump his problems on me. That doesn't work either. So the women are tired now and we've got to kind of let men clean up their own vomit. And it's not very nice to say, but the reality is women are losing their lives trying to deconstruct this thing. It was never asked to deconstruct. The reality is some might argue that a lot of my outlook might be enabling patriarchy, because I always say to women, if you're going to date a man, date one that can take care of you, date one that's got money, date one that's got success for himself. And it's not just because I want to buy Prada and Gucci. No, it's because asset ownership. It's about thinking for the future. It's about if a man's going to be in the picture, he needs to make your life easier, because for a woman, the number one risk to our life is a man.
Yeah.
So it's about if I'm going to lay with my oppressor and get fucking fingered by him, let it be in a house that he's put in my name. So that if shit hits the fan,
too right.
Period. If shit hits the fan, I'm leaving with more than I came with, because it's the least we could do if we're talking about reparations. But in terms of deconstruction of systems, that's the work that men are avoiding.
Yeah. It needs a whole overhaul, because I think it's so intersectional when it comes to all of these topics. Even like the conversation around transness and like trans rights as well, and queerness and homophobia and racism. It's all linked down to these patriarchal systems. So a lot of influencers, people get given a platform. A lot of people right now, we're seeing it quite publicly, getting a lot of a negative light or using their platform in a more negative way. There's a lot of influencers, I won't say his name, but has a big following, very women hating.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. We're not saying his name.
Yeah, we're not saying his name, but they have a following of younger people that are being influenced. And also there's recently kind of clips going viral of other influencers talking about their sex life on podcasts. And that's also going viral
as well.
Yeah.
Yes, we're not going to name her either.
But like, how do we combat that kind of like those influences? Because I feel like standing up for something and being positive or being a light, but then we also have to give space for everyone to have their opinion. But how do we combat when it's kind of growing this ever kind of hate train, you know?
It's scary, you know, because for influencers like the woman hating one, or influencers like the young lady who, just to give brief context, decided to make a TikTok about sleeping with 100 men, one after the other. First of all, there's nothing wrong with having loads of sexual partners, but we just have to be really careful, because TikTok is a platform that children have access to. And secondly, the fact that those two people are able to exist so hypervisibly points to the times that we're in right now, where there is a level of extremism we're living through, where people feel pulled into one side or the other. So we have extreme conservative people, for example, like the trad wife side of the internet, which has its own issues. And then we have the other extreme, which is I'm going to fuck 100 guys one after the other and I'm going to make a TikTok about it. Alongside, I hate women, I'm going to traffic them, and then I'm going to teach men how to get over on women and manipulate them. Ultimately, all we can do is push in the opposite direction with whatever we have, really. It's almost like playing tug of war. Just got to keep pulling. In this case, because it's a rope, we're not pushing the rope. But there isn't really anything we can actually do to stop these people from having a platform, because they're entitled to their own opinions. But the more we can use our presence to educate people, I think you can educate people without being preachy. You can educate people by just being an example. Because if people can see your journey, like you're a great example of this, right? I watched your journey on Drag Race and have been following you since, and seeing how you're not a preachy person. You don't have to say anything for people to see that you're proof that you can make your journey whatever you want it to be. I think that's really important, because sometimes people feel this fear of like, I'm not articulate. How do I use my presence on my platform to encourage change? You have to quite literally, without being cringe, be the change. And if you're influential, and if people like you, and if people see themselves in you, they know what to emulate from what you've done. And so it comes down to what we can all do as individuals to just represent what we value in our communities and our society. So for me, it's like, I don't have the biggest voice, but I know that I can be an example of what I want to see. Like, I am living the change that I want to see. So the man-hating misogynist who's got a big platform, I'm never going to change his mind, not going to attempt to. If I'm invited to a debate with him, politely decline, because I would only argue with my equal intellectually. It would be a disservice to him to put him in that position because he cannot.
Can't keep up.
It'd be a waste of, right, honestly, it'd be a waste of time for everyone involved.
Have you been in situations where you've been put on a panel or a talk for that polarizing effect, you know? Because I've declined places because I know that they've got an agenda. Have you been in those situations before?
Oh, I've been invited on Piers Morgan's show before and I've declined. On that, what's that, GB News channel? Yeah. I've been invited on that and I declined. And funny enough, I think the reason they wanted me on was there was a movie, Top Gun, that came out maybe like almost 2 years ago. And the talking point was they wanted me to discuss whether Top Gun is pushing toxic masculinity narratives. I think it's like a fast cars, gun kind of film.
Yeah.
I was just like, the fact that they've invited me on means they already know what they want me to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not about to be on there discussing that and arguing about, I mean, it's a film.
Yeah, and it's like, if you want to really talk about toxic masculinity, let's leave Top Gun and let's look at all of this. Do you know what I'm saying?
Because it would have been different if, let's say, I was invited on Piers Morgan's show to discuss the rise in misogyny and, you know, the extreme polarization between men and women. Even though I'm not going on Piers Morgan's show, I don't have any intentions to do so. That sounds like something I'd rather give my time to. But Piers Morgan is not someone I'm interested in being on his show. And it's not to bash him. It's just to say that sometimes, yeah, you're offered platforms to speak. But again, when you're someone who has a voice and a message, you've got to be equally picky about where you place your message. Because sometimes what can happen is you come in well-intentioned, you've got all your facts and your ducks in a row, and someone will just deliberately throw a curveball at you to have you arguing a point that has nothing to do with what you're there for and isn't pushing the needle forward. So as people like ourselves, we have to recognize that we don't have to change people's mind to do the work we want to do, because there are people whose minds don't want to be changed. They just want to watch us fatigue ourselves.
Totally that. And I think there's also a lot of the times you can see whether they're actually trying to push the narrative forward or they're just trying to create clickbait or create an argument. I remember one example was on a TV morning breakfast show, and I had a book, which we'll get into your books in a second. This is a good little segue to that.
Yes.
I had a book as well, and I was going on there to be interviewed about the book, and they wanted me to wear... This was your book? It's my book, yeah. And they wanted me to wear a certain outfit.
Wait, the TV people...
told me what outfit to wear.
I've never experienced that in my life. I've been on TV many times, and I've never heard
8:30 in the morning, high-rise pink thong, pink Tudor look. They wanted me to wear pink stripper heels. I'm like, I know when to wear that. It's around a pole. But it's like 8:30 in the morning.
So they
you want me to go
wanted
on there
to stereotype you.
They wanted me to sit there talking about my book, which is all about my personal experiences and things that I've gone through, in a high-rise pink thong. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing it. Because I know that it's not about my book. It's about what I'm wearing and me being...
sensationalize you.
Sensationalize the fact that I wouldn't know when to wear a high-rise pink thong.
Because a queer person can't just be in a normal jumper and a pair of black trousers.
Exactly. Like, it was ridiculous. And listen, I know you do too, I love dancing around a pole.
Period.
And that's when I'll do it.
Time and place.
Yeah, time and place, not 8:30 in the morning. Because I know what it's about, you know? So I think it's about, like, knowing yourself enough to be like, I don't need that.
You've got the discernment.
And I still got Sunday Times bestseller.
Period. Let them know.
Yes,
Period.
and so have you. How does that feel?
Do you know what's interesting about that? And I'm glad I can...
like Sunday Times.
I know, right? Like, that's verified by numbers. That ain't no voting panel. That's all numbers, honey.
That's
the
sales,
numbers
baby.
don't lie, honey. Period. But it's so interesting because I can speak to you about this author to author. It's the highly coveted thing for any author. There are people who have platforms bigger than both of mine and yours combined, and they have to pay publicists to get the book out there. They have to put a lot of effort. And some of them don't even manage to get the book on the Sunday Times chart. And then there's people like us who manage to do it because of the strength of our work and the people who care about us and follow us. But what's interesting is, like, once you get that Sunday Times chart position for your book, the moment leaves as soon as it comes. It's like, I've done it now.
Yeah.
Okay. It must be how musicians feel when they get a Grammy. It's like, you've got one Grammy, but you don't have 7. Someone's got 7. So you have to, it's almost like why I'm saying this is because
I was thinking, what's next?
You're thinking what's next. And people like us, right? We've got that working class background. So you know that it's already the high achiever mentality is there. Because there's always this inherent desire to prove yourself. But we have to be careful to recognize, to like learn when to get off the horse. Like, I got my Sunday Times #1 bestseller. That's okay. I don't need 5 more.
Yeah.
I've released 2 other books since then. Neither of them were a Sunday Times bestseller after that. I'm still proud of my books. They still sell.
Absolutely. Sometimes some people are never going to get that. Never going to experience
right.
that.
The achievement in itself is to be a published author. Like we can't lose sight. Because what happens in this industry is there is such a huge yearn to achieve stuff and to prove that you deserve to be amongst the elites that you forget that even being able to publish your book and have your book sold in a Tesco or a Waterstones is a huge deal. Whether it becomes a Sunday Times charting book or not. Now, if it charts on the Sunday Times, that's a huge deal. Well done. Pack it up, ma'am. Let it go there.
It's so hard to keep up with that. Like, you can't keep up. We need to take time for ourselves, right? Yeah.
Deeply. And also, what's interesting about my book as well is What a Time to Be Alone that became a Sunday Times #1. It came out in 2018 and it became a Sunday Times #1 in like 2020.
Wow.
Which is fascinating because the pandemic happened.
Yes.
People were alone.
That's amazing though.
It goes to show as well. The quality and integrity of your work. I always believe like before trying to aim to be some sort of chart topper, whether you're a musician or an author, make quality work that will stand the test of time. Because what can happen is you can have a peak later on down the line and be like, oh, this is a surprise. Because for me, What a Time to Be Alone, I didn't have a high advance. I think my advance, and I'm happy to talk about it, my advance was like 12.5 grand at the time. That was my first book and I was a new author to the scene. And I was okay with that. I was like, okay, 12.5 grand, fine. But I've since earned out the advance now. Yeah. So every year I get twice a year, I get the royalty check, make a few thousand. Ooh. But yeah, twice a year. And I'm like, okay, the book is okay. So it's like sometimes there's this whole idea of like, as an author, you should endeavor to get £150,000 advance. That's nice. It's really glamorous to have that, especially when the bookseller article comes out saying that there was a competitive, like the publishing houses were competing for your book and it ends up being a 6-figure deal. It sounds good and it's a great achievement. Now you've got to sell so many units to finally earn out that advance. And the thing about the £150,000 advance, that's going to get taxed. So you're not even keeping £150,000. Your manager or agent will take their cut. You're going to spend that. You might never see
royalties.
You literally might not see royalties. You're going to spend that. Like that money's going to go, especially if you're already somebody who is like a bit behind on your expenses and you needed that book deal to get your money. That money's gone now. So it comes down to, again, you really have to have a deeply strong sense of self if you want to have any kind of presence in this industry, because there will always be someone doing better than you. There will always be somebody who will be the image of what you think you could be.
Where does that sense of self for you come from?
That's a really good question, Bimini. That sense of self for me comes from knowing that the career and the life I have now, I've entirely made this by myself. And it's not to say that I'm discrediting having had a team at some point. It's more to say that the idea of who I wanted to be, which is the person I am now, that all came from my head. Like I knew one day, like, oh, I want to write a book and it's going to do well. Or, oh, one day I want to have a podcast, but we'll see. I'm not in a hurry. Like all these things that was initially an idea of what I wanted to do has now come into fruition. And so now that I'm able to recognize the power of how I see myself and the power of being persistent with that goal, even when I'm not getting any results yet, is what keeps my self-esteem largely intact. And also, you have to really be okay with missing the party. Like, there was a time when I used to make a lot more money. I would say 2019 was like my golden era, because that was before the pandemic. That was before the big influencer boom where like everybody overnight on TikTok became an influencer. So that was a time, 2019, when people like myself we were like gold dust, essentially. You couldn't really find people like me and you. And so I made a lot of money in that period, and I used to be able to afford to pay a publicist monthly. And then for me, what happened was pandemic happened. And obviously brands have suddenly changed the direction of where they're going. And then now we're in a recession and brands have less and less money. And so I found different ways to make my money. But the way I make my money now is not through brand deals anymore. I'm not seen everywhere at the parties. And for a while, initially, when I let go of my publicist and I had to start doing things on my own, I used to see the events happen. I'd be like, oh, I can't believe it. I should be there. That should have been me there. And I used to feel this sense of, because I'm missing out on these parties, I'm missing out on something, which must mean my career is not doing well if I'm not at these parties. Because for a lot of us, the indicator for us to know that we're doing well is we're in certain rooms with certain people. It's a very visual thing. Now I have a Patreon, and I kid you not, I'm making almost twice my rent money on Patreon.
Amazing.
Right? It's almost like having a brand deal all the time. But it's no brand deal. It's me and having a really incredibly strong audience and making quality work that people would want to part money with monthly.
Last question I'm going to say.
No, I'm loving this conversation.
It's so good.
Last question. We're here all day.
We can. We'll have to do a part 2 and a part 3. But if you were to give, so if someone was to come to you and they were trying to find their identity, struggling with who they were, what piece of advice would you give to that person?
That's such a beautiful question. If someone was struggling with their sense of identity,
trying to find a place for themselves or who they are, or were confused or just wanted to stand for something but it didn't, like what piece of advice would you give to somebody that
So the neurodivergent answer I'm going to give here is, if you've got a special interest, really, really dive into that special interest. And I say this from a place of being neurodivergent myself. It's really hard to be motivated to do something that you don't actually enjoy. But if you have a special interest and it's literally collecting stamps, be a stamp collector.
And do it bloody well.
Right? Make content about your stamp collecting. Make sure that you're also designing your own stamps, but have a strategy where you're slowly designing your own stamps. As your stamp collection profile grows on the internet, you slowly roll out your own stamps, you know? Like, the reason I'm saying this is because...
Make your own stamp.
Make your own stamp on the world.
Yes.
No pun intended. But honestly, for people who are really struggling with that, it's like, I always say, just like, there is something that you love doing and maybe you don't really talk about it because it's cringe. Be cringe just for yourself, because the good thing about the time we're in now is, even if you're doing something just for yourself and you happen to be documenting it, you're going to find other cringe people who are just as cringe as you. You can be in your own little cringe echo chamber. Sometimes echo chambers are good, because when you're trying to create something for yourself and you need positive reinforcement, you might not get that from the people in your life who love you because they don't get it. But if you got that positive reinforcement from a positive echo chamber on the internet of stamp collectors, you're off to a great start.
Find your niche.
Find your niche. And it's like, not everybody's going to want to put themselves out online, which is fine. But if there's something that you really like doing, just let yourself have that for yourself. It's the least you can do for yourself, because we're already in a world that makes us feel so ashamed to be who we are. And tune out of the world that's happening around you when it comes to the more glitz and glam stuff. And I say that as someone who genuinely I've been there. Like, I've genuinely been there in the whole public figure circuit of it all. And now I'm not in those rooms anymore. Like, I can still dip a toe in, but you know, sometimes it's because I'm a +1. Sometimes you're going to be the +1, and that's okay, because this whole thing is arbitrary. This whole thing is made up, and you can't over-identify with your success. You have to deeply just identify with the fact that I'm a human being. My heart is still beating, so I'm still here. So if today's going to be my last day, let me just like indulge my special interests a little longer, because I'm going to die anyway. That's kind of how I see it.
Chidera, this was such a beautiful chat. Thank you so much for coming on The Pieces.
Thank you for having me.
I need you back for a part 2 and a part 3, because that was so amazing. I could listen to you all day, honestly.
I loved this conversation, and I'm sure that those listening are going to love it too.
Thank you.
And now I'm in pieces. Yeah.